Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another of these interview episodes of the SWW show. First off, it's weird because it's videos. I don't quite understand this. AJ told me I have to look professional today. It's very
I mean,
confusing.
looking professional for the both of us is switchers.
Perfect. Yeah. Anyway, I'm Mike, as you know. That they're speaking is AJ, and we have a guest with us today. From all the way from sunny. I've heard cold for LA standards, but warm for me and AJ by a mile. So we're gonna say sunny, warm Los Angeles. Sam. Sam, let's start with how are you doing today? I guess it's like 11ish or so for you right now.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It is a little cold for LA standards here. It is below 60, which is
Oh darn!
awful for us. Yeah, it's really tough to adapt. It was 90 last week, so big
Sounds like
180.
Florida. Like it's 90 or 60, and there's no in between.
Look,
Yeah,
it is
basically.
like 10 outside right now for me. So like you would literally
Where are
probably
you based?
die. I'm in Madison, Minneapolis right now. So like it's a lot colder
Oh
than
yeah,
here.
no, I wouldn't leave the house. No way.
Like he's wearing a t-shirt, AJ. Me and you wouldn't dream of wearing a t-shirt right now.
I mean, I'm wearing a t-shirt underneath this. I probably would have worn it anyway, but it's sunny and balmy, 34 degrees out right now.
No, I can't handle it. My family's on the East Coast, and that's where I grew up. And every time I visit, it's usually dead of winter when I visit because it's like holidays and everything. And I'm just the worst there. They're like, let's go do something, and I'm like, what if we don't? What if we just sit in the heat all day?
What if
He's like
we
he's
enjoy
like
this?
yeah, he's like we have hot chocolate in the house. We have a fire. We have
Yeah.
10,000 blankets. Where am I gonna go? I don't understand.
Right? The whole like getting dressed for the cold, I'm just not into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Right.
You come from a land where t-shirts and shorts is the business attire.
Oh yeah.
That's good. Yeah, so we're here to talk about. I guess it's kind of twofold now that we kind of initiated that. So we're here to talk about a combo of you have a port coming up of you guys' game Where Cards Fall, and also you are
Hmm.
part of the team behind. I want to say the home run success because I don't have a better phrase this
Nice
one.
fun.
Yeah, game of Blaseball. Uh, why don't we start out with? I kind of want to start out with Blaseball just because it's a thing I feel like
Sure.
that really wrapped into last year, and I feel like a lot of people talked about, and like you guys got a ton of features on even stuff like Giant Bomb's Game of the Year and like articles written about it out of nowhere. You're going to start with like that pitch of like what is Blaseball?
Yeah, baseball is an absurdist horror take on like fantasy baseball, where you are betting fake money on fake teams that play simulated games of baseball around the clock, like 24 hours a day. And you are using your earnings to buy a variety of things, but the main thing that you cash in on are votes. And every single week, we have an election where you can vote on how you'd like to remake the league in your image. And some of the options that you have are like kind of standard rule changes, like relegate a team. Other things are a little bit crazier. Like the very first season of baseball concluded with the fans voting to open the forbidden book, which caused the discipline era, and umpires started incinerating players with their eyes, and it just got worse from there. But yeah, it's really a game about like mass collaboration. You know, we always say it's like you're collaborating and building solidarity against malevolent forces that are outside of your control. Malevolent forces like the peanut god, which was killed at the end of the first era of baseball. So that's the kind of stuff that you do in it. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, my initial understanding of baseball was it is kind of the evolution of these ARGs that started back. I mean, well, the one that I can remember is like the Halo ARGs, and then for this to kind of come out of nowhere, it felt like when I was hearing about it, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be for some like I don't know, random like super mega baseball or one of those kind of arcadey baseball games. I'm like, so I
Still
didn't
might
really,
be. Who knows?
yeah, who knows? I was like, I'll just whatever. I don't like to get into those anyway. So, but then it started. I kept hearing about it and hearing about it, and then it was kind of like, oh, this thing has legs. It's not just it's going to play out kind of the way that the developer of whatever game it's supposed to be an ARG for, like, it's not that anymore. It's okay from my point of view. This is a serious, like, serious is a weird word to use for
It's
it.
hard to use that word with Blaseball,
Yeah,
but I get what you're
not,
saying.
like, there's zero interaction short of the votes. And so people were talking about, like, yeah, you're just watching like a ticker go by as things are happening. And I'm like, I just like I know the draw behind those games, like a football manager, like the
Mhm.
out of the park baseball games, that it's just you don't see anything. It's like, oh, so and so hit the ball and got to first. I'm like, man, I just can't, like, I'm sure there's people that love that stuff, but I just couldn't get into it. And I was like, okay, the thing's gonna die out because people are gonna get bored, and then
You had high
lockdown.
expectations for us.
Well, just knowing kind of the way things go, right? Of like it gets popular, and then there's just a tail to it. But then lockdown continued and continued, and I'm like, this thing's just gonna last forever. Like, people are just they're having this up on a second or third monitor, and it's just running, and I'm like, okay, whoever made that, like, first off, it was amazing how long it lasted, kind of the anonymity of it, of like nobody knew who the commissioner was, and like it's just this shadowy figure, and then people started to guess and things like that, and like I don't care, whoever's running this is amazing at it, that or they're the luckiest person in the world. And then it just kept going and going and going, and people are talking about it still, and I'm like, man, like Call of Duty couldn't even do this. Like, most Call of Duties, Modern Warfare and Black Ops, have been incredibly successful for them. But you hear of things dying out after 4 to 5 months. This is going on, what, like almost a year now, it feels like.
Well, time is hard to track these days. We launched Blaseball in late July, so we're not quite at a year yet. But the game was only really live for about 3 months. The first era, the discipline era, lasted from late July into late October, and then we're on what we're calling our grand siesta right now, which is our opportunity to develop the next era of Blaseball. So we just announced actually that we're going to be back in late February. We announced a tentative date of February 22nd. Gave ourselves a little bit of leeway too in case we need an extra week or two. But that's what we're shooting for right now. We've got a lot of good stuff planned.
You like, worst case, there was a pandemic outbreak on the teams, and now we're gonna take an extra week there for the teams to really recover, is what you can go with, I assume, when you hit that delay.
Just say one of my learnings working in video games is that all dates should probably be tentative if you can make that happen.
I like all dates just being like a month or a season when you develop games. I'm like, when's your
Yeah.
game coming out? I'm like, fall of 2021. And like, what does that mean? I go, I don't know. I haven't described what fall means yet. I'm still figuring that out myself. So I've got
or just do a year, just tie a year to it and be like 2024. Oh, it came out in 22. There you go. You guys are like,
There you go, bonus.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I've got to ask, I'm kind of curious, so you guys obviously are letting the people kind of decide, and then stuff's reacting accordingly, and the user doesn't know quite how stuff's going to react. How much of that do you guys have planned ahead of time versus how much of it is like, okay, they decided to open this box, we have to decide what opening this box means?
Yeah. We kind of like set landmarks. So we have like a general sense for what the overall space that people can play in looks like what the possibility space looks like. But we don't know what direction people are going to move within that space. So once they start moving, then we start adapting on the fly. And a lot of the core pillars might be there. Like we might know, like, okay, we have this event that if they do a certain number of things, we can bring that in. There's an opportunity for that. But the players will always do things that surprise us and always do things that we don't expect, which means that we have to adapt on the fly. And that's part of the fun of it, is that, the players can organize a campaign around necromancy and bring a player back from the dead, which is not something that was planned at all. And then the next week, we bring them back from the dead, but at a cost. There's like a new little story beat in there too. And that type of stuff is really fun because it feels like a performance on both ends. It's a performance from us, helping to like kind of facilitate what the narrative could be, the players seeing what the possibilities are, doing something that we don't expect, and then us responding to that.
I feel like that stance is like it's the one thing that regular sports and digital, well, not even digital, I mean physical, like tabletop games do it too, where if there's a rule, if you're banking on everybody following that rule, your entire thing is going to crumble because somebody is going to find that rule and be like, okay, well, it says I can't do this, but it doesn't say that I can't do this. So I'm going to, my favorite example is there was a time in hockey where there weren't rules for goalies just putting up the snow on the ice to block the puck when they left the net. So they would do that. And then finally the NHL was like, sorry guys, you can't do that anymore. Well, then they started packing it around the posts and then they had to take that out. And I'm like, guys, like, just, the rules are going to be broken. And so for a game, like, there are games that you can kind of, at least the vast majority of people, you can get in a corral, right? Like Call of Duty is a great example because it's happening right now. That game has like, it's a corral, right? Not more than 90% of the people are going to play a specific way. They're not going to attempt to break the game. Whereas Blaseball being this like Twitter revolution of everybody suddenly got a ton of time on their hands, and this one thing where people can gather around that you don't even have to be a fan of sports to understand it. Like that was, if there was one thing that was going to be like, they nailed it. It doesn't rely on baseball knowledge. It doesn't rely on sports knowledge, really. And so people can just start hashtags and Twitter campaigns, and for you guys to do something like that and just like open up like, hey, here's the rules, but we're open to changing this, is like, I think that's the perfect approach now. Like, it's, you guys nailed, from my point of view, right? You nailed it. And it's just like, this project will be talked about in 5 years time, if that, in college courses of
That's what I was thinking.
viral
Would be
marketing. Yeah. Of, marketing virality, and also like just the group think. Like it'll be psychology classes, it'll be marketing classes, it'll be development classes. Like it's got to feel good knowing that something that you made is suddenly like changing not just the book, right, but changing literal textbooks that people are studying.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really cool feeling. If we are lucky enough to see those textbooks include baseball, I think it'll be really sensational. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that it's resonating with so many people and has allowed people to form communities and just get a sense of like being with other people in a very isolating time is what's most fulfilling about it for us. The original like design goal for this project was, let's design something that can bring people together during quarantine. And like everything was driven out of that goal. That the mechanics, even like the theme, is we're sports fans at the game band, and we're missing sports. So we're like, okay, this seems like using that as our reference point could be a way to give people something they can passively engage with, which is what we're used to doing during this time. And this is before all of the major sports leagues came back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You guys nailed that. There was that stretch where like it was, everything ended,
Mm-hmm.
and then it wasn't sure when things were going to happen, and then suddenly you start hearing about this random Twitter thing of, oh, check this out, like it's baseball, but it's not. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like I'll
That's
just
the pitch right there.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll just wait for regular baseball. Because baseball, like Also, you guys picked the perfect sport, right? Because like I don't
There's not much to watch.
right.
That's gonna be putting baseball, I think.
Like baseball is the ultimate social game. It's 3 to 3.5 hours of sitting with your friends, drinking beer, eating hot dogs, and occasionally watching guys hit a ball 400 feet. And so it allows kind of that the social aspect of it, right? Of
Mhm.
there's a lot of
It's a game
downtime.
that you enjoy passively.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other really nice thing about baseball is that it's a very character driven sport, and that you
Yes.
have a duel between a pitcher and a hitter, and you can focus on these two people at once rather than a whole team's movements. So when you're just like, into the text form, just focusing on one character versus another character, and it adds a lot of drama to it. It makes it much easier to spark your imagination.
So I got to ask, I know you're in LA. Are you a Dodgers fan? Are you an Angels fan? Are you
Dodgers fan.
okay? Well,
Yep.
they're
Very
my
happy.
second team. I mean,
Nice.
I
Who's your first?
Tigers by guilt by association, being in Michigan. But
Tigers had some good years.
yeah, and the last time the Dodgers won was thanks to a Tiger. So they kind of became my adopted second team after seeing
I like that.
the Gibson era at both teams, and so it was fun to watch. Plus, they're just fun to watch. Like you have Cody Bellinger, who looks like he's continuously just ripping a bong in the dugout and just stoned out of his mind, but somehow is one of the best players in the world. And then that
It might
entire
be
team is fun.
related.
He's like, I don't care. I got this.
And then
He's a
you
very
got
relaxed hitter.
yeah, and then you got guys like Muncy who will just bowl somebody over. You got
Yeah.
lights out pitch. Like it's a very very fun team to watch, and it's fun to see because I mean, LA, what the last time it was 86, but even the Angels weren't good. They've never been good.
Well, last time it was 2020.
Well, yes, but
Very
previous
happy
to
about
previous to
that.
20, it
Yes,
was
sir.
86, I believe.
See, I grew up in Chicago, so we have the Cubs fan, which is the correct answer there, and that is all that said there is that is the only answer in Chicago is a Cubs fan. Anyone else is lying to you. I'm sorry, is half the city now knocking at my door? I'm confused. So I have a question here. I've been reading on my second monitor just stuff about Blaseball and like different quotes and stuff. I was looking at the Wikipedia page of Blaseball, which as accurate as Wikipedia always is. I have to ask about. It says your original idea here was to make this a horse racing game.
Yeah, that's accurate. So originally, actually, this actually is kind of a cool thing to talk about, because what we do at the game band is we don't always start with like mechanics, or we basically we're starting with a overarching design goal. Sorry, my headphones keep coming out here. But basically, like, for Where Cards Fall, we wanted to make a game that was kind of expressing the fragility of life through its game mechanics. And through Blaseball, we were trying to make a game that would bring people together during an isolating time and be able to be played passively. So the very first, as I started thinking about that, like, what could that look like? What I came up with was, okay, browser based would probably be interesting, even though that's not common these days because everybody has a browser tab open while they're working from home. And it would probably be something that we have to be able to play without like too much input, so that it could exist during your day-to-day life. And it would be really cool if everybody was watching the same thing, so it wasn't like something that you have to kind of plan around or like spin up an instance of on a Zoom call or something. And gambling felt like a really nice like way to have like a very light investment. And when I thought of gambling, my first thought was horse racing, because I think part of this is I grew up in Baltimore, and Baltimore is like a big horse racing culture as
Yep.
well. So that was the first thing that came to mind. And also, one of our team members, Roldan, had been working on a tech demo where he was using horse racing as a theme. It was for a different project, but it wasn't a horse racing project. He was just using that as the theme for the tech demo. And that was in my mind too. So I pitched it to the team, and I got like complete dead silence from them when I first pitched it. They were just like, why are you pitching this to us right now? And then I started to like kind of explain what I was excited about the idea, and they're like, okay, we're starting to get it, but the horse racing just has got to go. Like nobody cares about horse racing. And then Joel, who's one of our lead designers, he was like, okay, maybe if it was like a little bit more absurd, maybe if it was something like snail racing. So then we started talking about that for a little bit, and then eventually we were like, wait a second, hold on, we're all baseball fans here. That sport makes so much more sense for this. We don't have to actually visualize anything except for the bases. The experience of following along a play-by-play on baseball on your phone or on a web browser is so like delightfully primitive. You can get so much out of just seeing like who's pitching, what's the count, who's at bat, what's the score. You get like a lot of the drama without anything else. So that seemed like a perfect fit for both scope and for the actual idea, and for the absurdity. We were like, okay, snail racing wasn't going to be it, but can we make a baseball league that descends into chaos? Probably. And that was our very first design discussion on it. It went from horse racing to snail racing to baseball league. It'll descend into chaos in about an hour, and then we got working.
That's amazing how like you walk into one meeting, you're like, hear out everyone, we're gonna bet on horses. Everyone's like, what about baseball? Like, it's more
Yep.
like it's a position on paper. You're like, I don't understand how we go from A to C at all, but I feel like we're missing a lot more than B in this middle.
It's a credit to my team. We've all worked together for quite some time now and have a lot of trust in each other, and are able to kind of see like when somebody's excited about an idea, kind of figure out what's the core part of it they're excited about, and is this and this like all extraneous from it. So, when I was pitching this, like I think what Joel latched onto was, okay, like what he's excited about is the simulation that everybody is watching, the gambling mechanics, and like the kind of mass multiplayer style where everybody is collectively, cashing in their earnings and doing things to affect the sim. So the theme itself was almost like, well, it just needed to make sense. So that's kind of where the horse racing came from, but that could be anything.
Also, I feel like baseball is, you don't have to do anything for it to descend into chaos. It just naturally does that. Like
Also, group voting naturally descends into chaos.
Yes.
You could have been on any topic. Everyone, the moment you put it to a group, and you have a big enough group, you're like, why are we now voting on, is this pick a president? That is not what this vote was about. Like, it's naturally stuff's gonna happen when you have a mass entity like that. So I do actually want to jump us into the other thing, which I believe you on for, which was your point of where cards fall. Before we get there, though, AJ, is there anything else about Blaseball you want to hit on with?
I can guarantee you I have way more questions, but also this isn't a Blaseball interview. However, I would love to turn it to that. This is about where the cards fall.
Well, I think the relationship between the two games, as different as they are, is kind of interesting. So it's not a bad place to start.
Also, it's really hard to invite someone who like helped make this thing that like came out of nowhere and like not talk about that.
Oh, totally.
It'd be like talking to Scorsese and not bringing up one of his masterpiece movies and just being like,
I don't care what weird
I do
thing you're
not think
now.
I'm on the same level as Scorsese, but I appreciate it.
I mean, maybe not in the
most
grand sense of it, but in terms of like you made a project that everybody latched onto. I mean, he makes projects that everybody latches onto. Like, I mean,
fair enough.
Scorsese makes weird indie documentaries, but I'm always going to ask him about Goodfellas. This is the moral of the question. Like, independent of what I'm here to talk about, Goodfellas is coming up, and he's understands these are the rules of existing in his life. Which you'll be asked about Blaseball now for the rest of your life. You hope you understand.
I hope so. I mean, I'm a big Scorsese fan, so
there we go.
I get always wanting to ask him about Goodfellas.
We'll clip that audio of comparing Blaseball to Scorsese.
That's our intro clip.
Send it to you, and then in your Twitter bio,
that's your clip.
Yeah, the Scorsese of video games. Hopefully, one day we can live up to that.
AJ, I expect you to clip that audio. Okay.
It'll be highlighted for sure.
So the thing we originally invited you on for was, so you guys are also working on a port of your mobile game Where Cards Fall. So immediately I've got to ask you, because you just made the comment yourself and the comparison yourself. Why are you comparing this to Blaseball?
Yeah, so Where cards fall and Blaseball are obviously not very similar to each other. One of them, Where Cards Fall, is a slice of life coming of age story where you're building houses of cards to bring memories to life. It is a puzzle game. It is very atmospheric, like for fans of games like Inside or games like The Witness. Like they'll have a lot to latch onto there. Blaseball, of course, is entirely or mostly text based and multiplayer and weird and very, very, very different. That said, the reason that I started the game band was I wanted to create a studio that could make games that would kind of push the boundaries of interactive storytelling or just explore new territory. Games are still a very young form and felt like there's a lot left to try. And make games that weren't like power fantasies, like things that were very distinct and different from anything people have played before. So I really wanted it to be a studio that could reinvent itself. And where cards fall, the initial inspiration came from the Radiohead song House of Cards. And Radiohead is one of my favorite bands because they take so many risks and they always are able to kind of redefine what your expectations are about them. So both of these games are attempts at making games that reflect the world that we live in, telling stories in really unique ways that only games can do. And they're both radically different from each other. So that's very much like kind of the ethos of the studio. And my hope is that whenever we do another project going forward, it'll be radically different from both of these projects, and it will continue to surprise people and continue to push ourselves.
You're going for the you bring up Radiohead, but the singer songwriter like Bon Iver or somebody like that. That each album is like, while they have connections between them, they are radically different projects. And
Yeah.
that's actually a really interesting take because you don't see that. I mean, really, like music and sometimes movies, like that's the only place that you'll occasionally see that. Games, it's like, oh, you are now a action adventure studio, you are a text
Yep.
studio. There's no, you're not going to see Dice make a walking
JRPG.
simulator
Oh,
or
that
JRPG,
works.
something
Yeah,
like that. Like,
and for good reason. I think the limitation in games for a long time has been the tech investment. Like you spend so much energy building out, your core technology around what you're good at, and then that kind of defines the types of games that you're making going forward because you've already built all this stuff. For a smaller studio that relies a lot on very like great off the shelf technology, like Where Cards Fall was made in Unity, Blaseball is a variety of web frameworks. That investment is a lot smaller. Like, yes, we did invest a lot into our own kind of custom tools for Where Cards Fall, but it's not the same as building an engine from the ground up. So if we want to do a more dramatic turn, there's the cost to do that is a lot lower. And that's
Yeah,
only
because
really been possible in more recent years when the off-the-shelf engines have gotten so good and just the whole field has been a lot more democratized.
as I said, yeah, because worst case, you're like, well, nothing similar besides what you do. We could take the safe system out, we could add this new thing and create those things, transfer the rest of it ground up. But like, you're not doing this. Not like 20 years ago you have written your own engine, and that people are like,
Right.
yeah, this engine only does stuff in 2D, and no one can move too fast because it just breaks, and we don't know why.
Yeah. No, totally. And there's like kind of conventional wisdom of do what you're good at. But I'm hoping that what we ultimately prove to be good at is unique forms of interactive storytelling, and that can take a variety of different forms, a variety of different genres. I mean, you mentioned film, like great storytellers can span multiple genres. Like I think about Danny Boyle, who
yeah.
almost never repeats a genre. Has done horror, has done drama, has done all sorts of things, biopics. All across the spectrum.
So I'm kind of curious. So as we're talking about where cards fall, I feel like just because the timing and how long it's been out. So that game was around the launch of Apple Arcade. If I have my dates
It's a
about.
launch title. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about right on that. So what's interesting to me is we're starting to see this trend now because it's been long enough where you've seen this Apple Arcade for a lot of titles exclusivity ending and now being able to be transferred to
Hmm.
other things. So I'm kind of curious. Obviously, staying with you in your grounds of NDAs and contracts because I know Apple probably made you sign 1,000 of those. How do you kind of feel that we're going to be seeing like a lot of this kind of stuff transferring over, and do you kind of feel like this is kind of like the trend from this point going forward in the industry based on what you kind of saw with this thing, where like people go like, now we go to this platform for this deal of these like subscription services, and then we kind of a year later start seeing the move on like more than we used to?
I honestly have no idea. I'm only privy to the deal that we signed with Apple. I'm not privy to
Mm-hmm.
what arrangements they made with all the other developers that were part of Apple Arcade. I mean, across the industry, like sometimes you have platform holders and publishers that have like a standard thing, and everybody goes with that. Sometimes everybody works out their own thing. I don't know, which part of that Apple is on. I'm very happy that we got to be part of the launch for Arcade, and I'm very happy that we're going to get to be on Switch and PC, in the near future.
It's it's funny that you mentioned that you were an Apple Arcade launch game. This is now like what, like our at least second that I can think of.
Yeah, because we also talked to the golf. We talked to the Watch the Golf
Oh, cool.
guys. Like
It's a
so
great
we
game.
talked to them right before they announced their Apple exclusivity deal, and that was really funny to us because we were like, "What's this arcade thing? Oh, we just talked to these guys. Oh, this is a giant game!" Like, so I think that's very interesting that like we keep finding this trend of like these games that are like either going on the platform or off of it. And Apple Arcade I think is interesting, just generally speaking, because it's a thing that like it's obviously very big, but I feel that like people aren't talking about. Like it's just a thing that is big. It's like I joke saying like League of Legends is giant, but if you ask people in the industry, no one talks about League of Legends anymore. It just is there making money. And I think Apple Arcade is kind of falling in that window.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of sectors of video games. There's like the things that are in vogue and in conversation for my Twitter feed, it seems like, and then there's games that are immensely popular that you never see conversations about. Some of the most popular games in the world right now are games that like I never see any discussions about. And I think I just think that's a really interesting phenomenon. Even things like, Among Us, which is such a fantastic game and brought so many people together this year. Not one that I always see in like game development circles, but even talking to friends and such, like it's huge.
It's a very like, yeah, it's interesting to think about because like if we think about what are the biggest games, like they're probably not big in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just kind of the way the world works. Like I hate to break it to Americans, but the US is not the biggest superpower in the world anymore. It's not the population center. If we
especially when you start kind of like mobile games are the biggest a lot of times. Like it's not America. It is even like stuff like I thought like I could be wrong. I thought like people talking about like even like Japan usually outnumbers Americans in mobile game playing. They might not Americans in game playing, but in mobile game playing they do.
And most people that play games are playing on mobile. That's another thing that is like hard for people that have been into this forever, to even like recognize and appreciate. But I mean, that is the biggest game platform right now. And a lot of those games that are really popular, like you were saying, are not widely discussed.
So I'm kind of curious then. So obviously you're going from a mobile platform to Switch and PC. And it's funny because to me I go, oh, jumping to PC, that makes a lot more sense in my head than almost. But controller wise, I'm almost curious if I'm wrong. Because in my head always I've thought controller wise, I'm starting to see more mobile Switch ports because it's very functionally very similar to an iPad in a lot of ways. Looking at it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll start off by saying that before we were selected to be part of Apple Arcade, Where Cards Fall was in development for Switch and in development for PC. So it shouldn't feel like a port when it comes out. Like it should feel just like a native traditional PC or Switch game. So these versions of the game have been in development for a really long time, and I'm really excited for people to finally experience them. The control issue is it depends on the type of game, but some games translate really naturally, some don't. And I think for a game like Where Cards Fall, we had a pretty enormous design challenge with translating the gameplay to all of these different platforms. I thought it was a very fun design challenge. Like I wasn't, angry about it at all. But on iPhone and iPad, when you're playing the game, the core mechanic of the game is you're building these houses of cards, and the houses of cards kind of become these like three-dimensional platforms that you can use to rearrange space and traverse through these levels. And the playing through a Where Cards Fall puzzle feels a bit kind of like it's almost like construction, and but like it's like Portal, but like a construction version in a way where you're like have to like kind of really get to know the geometry of the space and really think through how you want to navigate it. And the core mechanic, we wanted it to be like incredibly tactile and like really feel like you're creating houses of cards, regardless of what device you're playing it on. So on mobile, we decided to use the pinch gesture. You know, you're like squeezing and expanding these piles of cards, and they kind of magically form into these structures. On PC, what you're doing is you're clicking and dragging, like you're pulling the cards and then releasing to let them, you know, turn into these card structures. And on Switch, we use the two joysticks together. So the left joystick moves the cards, the right joystick expands and contracts them. You almost never see the right joystick for anything except for camera, but we're cards also fixed camera, so we're able to have a little bit more fun with it. And then the triggers are for kind of grabbing the cards. We focused on the most like tactile parts of the controller. I think it feels really, really nice. You can also play with the controller on PC too, so you know, whichever version you get, you'll get that.
So I have to imagine, knowing that it was originally going to be a PC and Switch game, like especially considering the way phones have almost surpassed, that I guess, what is it, the eighth generation, right? Like they say the Switch is roughly comparable to a PS3 and a 360 in terms of horsepower. Like the fact that the chip inside the Switch is basically what an iPhone runs on now, like that had to be a not insurmountable task, but like a much smaller hill to climb, to be like, okay, we're taking this and moving it to mobile. Whereas even 2 years ago, like that hill would have been like, okay, we have to scale back features, or we have to scale back graphics or something like that. Like it's got to feel really good for your project to, succeed in a way that it has, with that hill now being super small.
Yeah, I mean, I will say like there's still plenty of optimization work. You know, whenever you're
Yeah.
focusing on a very specific platform, there's platform specific things that you just have to take into account that are going to be different. I'd say for the iOS platforms, one of the challenging things was there's a pretty broad spectrum of mobile devices.
Right.
You know, you have high-end mobile devices, your brand new ones that have really impressive graphics tech at this point, than ones from just a few years ago that are very,
Don't.
very different. Right. And you know, with mobile players too, like they don't necessarily, and this is not their fault at all, they just don't necessarily have an understanding of the performance differences between those. So we just have to make sure that it runs as well as it possibly can on all of them. You know, these devices, like your phone is not marketed like a PlayStation. It's not like you're buying the new phone for the next, you know, level of graphics or anything. It's a new phone. It's gonna be faster, and yeah, you don't know that all that other stuff comes with it too.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, and again, if at any point you feel like you can't answer this because NDA is just obviously just shut me up, kind of be like, hey, we either don't want to
Okay.
answer, so you can't. What is the line of like? So obviously you're developing this thing for Switch and Steam and these platforms in
Hmm.
mind, and then you got invited or whatever you said to Apple Arcade, and you pivoted at that point. Are you allowed to kind of like keep the work you had so far and just kind of put it on freeze and then come back to it again, or do they kind of be like, no, kind of like this is a different thing and you have to go kind of restart more from scratch in these ports kind of thing?
Um, you know, that question actually never even really came to mind because by the point where we were selected for Apple Arcade, you know, we had to finish developing the game. So then once the game was, you know, finished and developed, uh, now it's like going back and bringing, you know, making the Switch version and PC version. A lot of that work kind of just deteriorated anyway because we moved past it. So the real the work that went into those two versions of the game that like kind of built up our base was more on the design sense. It was more of like we had figured out like what the control scheme was going to be. We had it running on these. We kind of knew what was working and what wasn't. So by the time it came to like actually like making the ports properly, we didn't have to go through a ton of iterations there. We already knew exactly what the spec was and just kind of dove right in.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So looking at the time, we've stole you now for roughly about 45 minutes. I think I have one last thing of AJ thing after that is, so right now you have Warrior Cards Fall coming out sometime this year in 2021 on
Mhm.
Epic Game Store, on Steam, on Switch. Do you have any tighter thing right now? Is that kind of your sticking with right now? Is this like 2021 somewhere in this year time frame we should expect it on those devices?
Yeah, it'll be early this year, so it's not that far off. But I don't have like an exact date for it just yet.
Perfect.
Yeah, just keep that date vague, as vague as you can, until like all of a sudden you're like, oh hey, here it is.
2020s. It is somewhere in this decade. We can expect it on these devices. It's perfect. And then obviously you said Blaseball back 222-ish asterisk question mark. I don't know,
Probably.
hyphen, probably back around then.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you can't use asterisk when you're going anything semi-related to baseball. There's too many of those already. You've got the Astros asterisk. You've got the steroid era asterisk. You've got
Yeah, when's gonna be Blaseball's first asterisk? We're waiting.
We'll find out that you actually was all actually happening in this world of simulation. Like it was gonna be like nonsense like that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
AJ, anything
Okay.
else for Sam before we let him go escape back to actual work?
Yes. Everybody listening, we need to get a Blaseball like trash can banging something like Sam wants an asterisk for Blaseball. We need to make an asterisk for Blaseball.
Yeah, what's the Blaseball version of banging a trash can?
Twitter bots.
There's
I
gotta
don't
be
know.
something.
Like buy like I guess it would be like
We
what?
better hope your spam filter is good on making accounts.
You
That's
know,
all I gotta
since
say.
you brought this up, one of my favorite little bits of making Blaseball is we named the Houston team the Houston Spies, and their tagline is "Bang Bang." And since so many of our fans are not baseball fans, very few of them even commented on that. And I thought that was like the most obvious joke that you could possibly go for, and was shocked to see like 3 messages in the Discord mentioning it.
The Houston Buzzers. Yeah. Well, that is like, you want to talk about like inside baseball, like that it kind of made its way to mainstream news. I mean, I remember seeing like screenshots of them talking about it on Good Morning America, and like, but was such a like, unless you knew what was going on, that story is like, people don't believe it. They're like, no, you're talking about like a movie. You're talking about like the next Ocean's movie is
Dodgers fans believe it.
Yeah. Dodgers fans. Who else? The anybody that played the Astros or Red Sox.
Yep.
Take your
guess
pick.
who else played the Red Sox?
Yeah. Anybody that played those 4 years.
I can't be bitter now. We won. We're good.
I mean, no, you can still be bitter. They deserve at least one more ring. So, yeah. Mike, I think that's it for me.
Well, Sam, thank you for spending your time.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, so thank you for your time. So let's make sure I have everything right. It is Where Cards Fall coming soonish. Switch, Steam, Epic Game Store, all that fun stuff. And then Blaseball is just blaseball.com.
Yes, blaseball.com. Follow Parker, the commissioner, on Twitter. He's doing a pretty good job. That's just at Blaseball. And we're the Game Band. You can find us on Twitter too.
Perfect.
Awesome.